Hey, and welcome to episode number 81 of the Brave Widow Show. Today I talk with Lauren and she shares her story of grief and widowhood. Before we dive into her story, I just want to remind you that your reviews and your feedback help the show so much in expanding its reach, in being able to help other widows, in being able to serve others that are out there in the community that are looking for help, that are looking for good, informational content. And these stories are so impactful. I hear feedback almost every day from someone who really resonated with a story, who came across the Brave Widow show just because someone shared it or because of a comment or review that they had left. And so please know that you doing the simple task of leaving a review, of engaging with the content, leaving a comment, sharing it, those simple steps can do so much to expanding the reach of the Brave Widow show and ultimately expanding the impact that these stories can have with other widows and helping them not feel so alone. All right, let me introduce you to Lauren McGuire. Lauren lost her husband to fentanyl poisoning on August 25th of 2021. At the time, their daughters were 11, 18 months, and 5 months. Now just think about that for a minute. Losing your spouse and going through all of the craziness of widowhood with an 11-year-old, an 18-month-old, and a 5-month-old. All right, let's dive into Laura's story. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Brave Widow Show. Today, I have a special guest with me, Lauren, and I'm excited for you to hear Lauren's story and some of the challenges that she and her family have had to overcome. So, Lauren, welcome, and thank you for coming on the
You.
show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, I know our audience would love to know more about you, your background, and then we can really just dive into your story wherever you'd like to start.
Okay. Well, my name is Lauren McGuire. I lost my husband to fentanyl poisoning on August 25th of 2021. We have three daughters who, since his passing, it's been definitely challenging juggling, everything and dealing with the grief. But luckily, I have a supportive family. They don't live too far. So they've really been, so helpful, not just with the kids, but, being a listening board for me. So, yeah.
That's good that you've had a lot of support. And I think grieving with with children is challenging. Like in some ways, it's helpful because you have them. Like you got to keep going. On the other
Yes.
hand, sometimes
Yes.
it's hard because you got to keep going.
Right. It's
So
like I can't stay in bed and just wallow for a day. Like I don't have that, option. So I totally
yeah,
understand that.
definitely. So tell us a little bit about how you met your spouse and what was it about him that you just thought, okay, he's the one.
Sure. So I am 36 and Nate and I grew up together. So I met him, to be honest, I don't even remember how we met. I was about 13 or 14 years old. I think what it was is we had similar friends. So we would, see each other at events or we'd hang out, at the skate park as kids after school. And so we just kind of met that way. And then growing up, we always had the same core group of friends. So we would, go to concerts together. We would, celebrate birthdays. We would do like friends Thanksgiving during the holidays.
Very cool.
So we really we grew up together. And I think what happened is in 2018, I wanted to purchase a home. And where my family lives in Denver Metro, it's, super expensive, like anywhere else, I guess. So I moved to Colorado Springs, about an hour south, and I had bought my townhome. And Nate had already lived here, so being friends, we're like, oh, this is cool. We can, hang out, get dinner, watch, movies. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started, was just simply from a pretty solid friendship.
Okay. And what's something that you just loved about him and your relationship and just really made him special to you?
Oh my gosh. Nate was one of those people that he was so full of energy. Like you knew when Nate was around. He was vibrant. He had such a good personality, such a good sense of humor. Um, just somebody that you really loved being around, someone who is just so much fun. And I think, knowing him so long and I just grew to love that aspect of his personality a lot. And that, you know, went over into our romantic relationship as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love those big, vibrant personalities. I
Yeah.
think it does make the hole it leaves feel a little bit bigger because maybe they have a big
Yeah.
laugh or they're, the center of
Right.
attention all the time.
Yes.
So that does make for an interesting dynamic shift, but it sounds like you guys just really had a lot of fun and
Yeah.
just a very colorful, beautiful relationship.
Yeah. He was great. I did know from a very young age that unfortunately he did have some issues in his childhood, which led him to substance abuse. I think he said he was 12 when he first tried. It was crack. So, like a hard substance at such a young age because he didn't have the tools to work through that trauma and get the help. So, that's what the crutch that he had that he used.
And how did you feel, when you learned that about him or when,
Mm,
you guys would talk about it, what were some of your thoughts there?
I felt so bad because here was this great person that was really suffering internally. Um, Nate was not always under the influence. He wasn't always looking for ways to get high. He's what I would call more of a chronic relapser. So he would have, months and months of sobriety, and then he would have a relapse, and then he would, be getting high for a few days, and then he would get clean, be sober for a few months. Like it was just a cycle. And, he hated it. He hated using. Um, I I was weary starting a relationship with him for that reason because that is a lot, to love someone and try to build a future with somebody who has those issues. So that
Yeah.
was definitely, something I talked about with him, and he did say he was going to try, to get it under control. But it was something that throughout our relationship, it happened several times. So that was hard. It's hard.
Yeah, that it is hard, and it's hard to imagine, being at a place where you feel that that's your solution and that's really what
Yeah.
gets you through. So I can't pretend to that I can understand what it's like to be there, but I know that it has to be a pretty dark place and a deep
Yeah.
place where people just really struggle with some of those addictions.
Yeah.
Did you have any issues with people around you not being supportive or people saying, well, he has this problem, why do you put
Yeah.
up with this? What was that like for you?
Oh, definitely. That was hard because I think at the time, since Nate has passed, I volunteer with substance abuse users, so I've learned a lot more about them and I've had a lot more empathy. But hearing those things from people who don't get it, who haven't loved somebody with this issue, I can understand because they care for me. But at the same time, it was really hurtful because here's this person that I love, that I'm worried about, that I want to be there for him through all of this. And having, family or friends say, "Oh, you should just leave him. You're better off." And it's like, well, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And then when we had our daughters, it made hearing those even more painful, hearing those comments.
So You guys were together for about how long was it?
So it was November 21st of 2018, and then he passed away in August of 2021. So we really didn't have a lot of time together at all, which as far as like a serious relationship, but like I had said, he was such a good friend for so long. It's like I feel like we've been together forever.
Yeah. And, about 3 years on one hand doesn't seem that long. On the other hand, feels like a
Yeah.
lifetime. I mean, even if you
Oh,
just
for
think
sure.
about, the amount. So I lost my husband July of 2021. So around the same time. And it just seems
Yeah.
like 20 years instead of just a couple of years. So
Yeah,
yeah, those
definitely.
times can definitely feel a lot longer than sometimes it seems. So
Right.
you had
Yeah.
a couple of girls together
We
and
did. Yeah. So we got pregnant with our first, Evelyn, in June of 2019. And I was petrified, to be honest. I have a 13-year-old from a previous relationship. So I feel like I've kind of already done the parenting thing. And here I am now, starting completely over again, um, with somebody who has these issues. I was very afraid. Um, and I don't like to say it, but it's part of my story. I thought of terminating the pregnancy. Um, but I remember Nate, begging me, I want to be a dad. I would be a good dad. Like, please give me this gift. Like, please. And I thought, being naive, maybe this is what he needs to stop using drugs. So I'm like, okay, like I know you very well. He was great with my oldest daughter for so many years. I'm like, okay, yeah, absolutely. Like, let's do this. You'll quit using drugs. Everything will be perfect. And we'll just have this happy little family. And uh, definitely, obviously did not work out that way at all. But then Evelyn was born, and he was so attentive to her. He loved being a dad. She was just the greatest thing to him in the world, and he was really good at it. I loved watching him, play with her or feeding her or, rocking her to sleep. Like it was a side of Nate that I never really got to see, and I was there for it. Like it was beautiful. I loved it. Um, but then right, the relapses, they were few and far between after Evelyn was born. So I will give him that, but they still happened. And then I found out I was pregnant with our second daughter almost immediately. And again, I was terrified. Even if somebody doesn't have these issues, having two kids like that back to back would be challenging for any family. Um, let alone, these issues. It was scary, but he's like, we're such a good team. Look at us go raising, Caroline and Evelyn. Like we're kicking ass. We could do it. And we were. Nate was going to school. He made a career change. He was making good money. I was like, okay, like let's do it. And so Madeline, we had her March of 2021.
okay.
So there's
So
us.
so you have these beautiful girls in your life and your daughter from before and these two babies really
Yeah. Yeah.
at the time that you lose him. So do you mind to share the circumstances or what happened when you
Sure.
found out that he had passed?
Yeah. So after we had Maddie, I think um, we didn't have the tools to navigate all these challenges together. Being that he was my partner and the person, I saw every day, it was so easy for us both to kind of turn against each other. So right before he passed away, we were living separately, still very committed to the relationship, but I think we just needed space. We had, three kids, a dog, him and I living in a rather small house for a family that size. So he went to stay at his father's house, which is only like 5 minutes away from here. Um, I think it was August 22nd of 2021. we took all the girls and we went to the lake with his aunt and uncle. We had a great day. It was awesome. It's like we didn't have any problems in the world. It was beautiful. And then we came back here. We dropped the kids off here. He hung out for dinner and then he had left to go back to his dad's. It was a Sunday, so he had to work that Monday. And he had called me that night, Sunday evening, to say goodnight and check in. And I could tell he had been drinking, but I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to start any drama or, we had a great day. I didn't want to rock the boat. So I just kind of left it alone. Plus, he didn't have an issue with alcohol, but I did notice that sometimes the alcohol led to those substances, but I didn't say anything. Um, and then I believe it was the next day, I got a text from his employer asking if I had seen him. And I'm like, oh, I knew right away that he had relapsed or something happened. So I called him, and sure enough, I could tell just by the tone of his voice that he was using. Um, and throughout his relapses, there were times that I had said some really cruel and hurtful things because I was angry. Here I am. I love you to death. You have all these kids. You have a house. Like, why are you still doing this? Um, he did explain to me, when I am doing these things, I hate myself. I don't like what I'm doing, and I don't need to hear from the person I love most in the world how much of a POS I am. As angry as it makes you, like if you can't just be somewhat kind, like let's just not talk at all. Understandable. So when Nate would relapse, we really didn't talk because we would just fight. And so I found out he was using, we talked a little bit about it. And then the next day, I had woken up to 8 missed calls from his father. I sleep with do not disturb on, so I didn't get the calls. And accompanying the phone calls was a message, and it said, I keep trying to call you, but it goes to voicemail. I hate to tell you this, but I found Nathan's body. He passed away.
Mm.
And seeing that first thing when you wake up, it's like, oh my God. So I ran downstairs screaming, calling him back, please tell me you're joking. And he's like, of course not. I wouldn't, joke about something like this. My daughter, my oldest, comes running up from her room in the basement, thinking the house is on fire. I'm panicking. And so I don't even know why, but I just got in my car and drove over to his father's house. And I think when I rounded that corner, it's when it really hit me because I saw, the coroner van, all the police cars. And I remember parking and just beelining it for the front door, screaming the entire time. The police wouldn't let me in. And I'm grateful for that now because Nate had actually passed away 24 hours before he was found. So he had been dead for a day. I was very angry at that time, but hindsight looking back, I'm grateful I didn't have to see that. And I just remember the police asking me questions like, what was he using? Do you know anybody that he could have called? The usual. And without warning, all of a sudden, here comes, Nate in a body bag being wheeled down his driveway. And I know they're just doing their job, but I remember sitting there thinking, like, you couldn't have told us, like me and his father who are standing outside, you couldn't have given us, a heads up because I think that's one of the pictures that I keep replaying sometimes is seeing that it was awful. It was terrible. And I went home and my family all came down and I remember sitting on my couch just sobbing, like, what am I gonna do? I have a 15 or an 18-month-old and a 5-month-old and an 11-year-old at the time. Like, how am I going to do this? It was terrifying, terrifying.
Mm.
Worst day of my life.
And how do you muster up the strength to communicate that to your children, what has happened, what that means, and help them kind of understand what those next steps are? How did you do that?
So for my little ones, they were too little at the time to really understand, but my oldest was old enough. And, it's something I talk to her now that she's a teenager about a lot. Um, Nate died of fentanyl poisoning. Um, to me, an overdose is you know what you're taking, you take too much, you pass away. Nate didn't know. He was deceived. He didn't know that's what he was buying. He was trying to buy something else, come to find out. So that's the difference to me. A lot of people aren't seeing it in their substances, they just take it without knowing. So I talk to my daughter a lot about it because she's old enough to understand and how dangerous it is, and she struggles too. Her biological dad has never been really involved. So she sees, me struggling, she's struggling, and I really try to kind of keep an open door. Anytime that, you need to talk, I'm here. I want you to talk to me. Don't bottle this up. But my little ones, they know who he is because there's pictures around the home, but I don't think they'll remember him at all. And I don't think they know, I tell them, "Oh, daddy's in heaven, but he's not coming back." And I don't think they get it because they're too little.
Yeah, they're still really young.
Yeah.
Um, so I can't even really begin to imagine just the trauma and the horror of seeing, some of those things that you had to witness
Yeah.
and just the adrenaline that must have been flowing through you at
Oh
that
gosh,
time
yeah.
and dealing with all of that. Did you have any challenges or people make snide comments or have you feel a difference of sympathy or support given the way that he died?
Oh, absolutely. I've heard, oh, well, this had to have happened. So your kids wouldn't be subjected to it. And to get you out of the relationship, the universe conspired for this to happen. Just horrible things. Nate, 98% of our issues came from the relapses. But other than that, I mean, it was pretty close to what I would say for me, a perfect relationship. So those comments really hurt me. And I chalk it up to a lot of ignorance, I guess. While there is personal responsibility that falls on Nate for doing those things, um, this epidemic is unlike anything that we've seen before. It's taking a lot of people, and these are people, that are parents, kids, their moms, their dads, their sons, their people love them, and so I think, but there is a stigma tied to it, like, "Oh, your husband chose this because of his actions," and that's just not true. Nate would have never have willingly left us like this. No way. No way.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in a situation like suicide or something where someone is making that choice, it doesn't change the pain. So
Right.
I think to your point, it's just people being ignorant. Sometimes I think people try to say something they think is going to make us feel better,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
oh, it
yes.
was meant to be, or, this
Right.
this is the way of protecting your kids. At least
Yeah.
they're not gonna be
Yeah.
subjected to this, and in actuality, it makes us feel worse
Oh,
for
totally.
what they're saying. So, what is
Very
maybe
hurtful.
something that let's say, I have a friend and they're in the situation that you were in early on. What are the words that you wish you would have heard more often? Or what are the things that people can do to really show their support for you as the family without having any judgment of how their person died?
I think a lot of it for me is validating the pain. Um, Saying, "Hey, this sucks and it's BS and it's not fair and I'm here for you and we can talk about it." No judgment at all. Um, it doesn't matter how he passed away. He passed away and you're stuck picking up the pieces, and that's brutal. So I'm here if you need to talk. Just I think validating. because I think when someone passes like this or they unalive themselves, there's a stigma to it as, oh, well, this must have been what they wanted. Like, why do you feel so bad? And it is so far, it's even almost more painful sometimes to an extent. Um, I also think people, when they talk about Nate to me, um, you can't remind me that Nate passed away. I know that. I think about it every day. But when you talk to me about Nate, you're reminding me that he lived and he had people that loved him and cared about him. So I would have loved, friends or family, anybody like, oh, Nate and I, this one time we went and did XYZ. Like, I love hearing those stories. And I think that's true for a lot of people that lose somebody they loved. Like when you bring them up, you're not reminding them that they died. Like, trust me, we know. We know. But just hearing about them and talking about them, I think that that brings me great comfort. So that's something else people could do.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And one of the things that I've really tried to do with my family is just talk about it like it's normal. Like, oh, your
Yeah,
dad would have loved this. He would have hated that. Remember that time we did this? And it's hard and weird and awkward in the beginning. But after you get through those first few initial times, it becomes just more normal and fluid and
yeah,
a great reminder because you probably don't feel like you get a lot of chances to talk about him in a way
right.
that doesn't make people uncomfortable or, like how
Yes,
many times can I tell my sob story to people?
right.
And yeah.
Yeah. It's like, why don't you tell me about the time that, you and Nate did something or you guys went and saw this concert? Like I love hearing those stories because it keeps him alive. We have photos, videos, memories, and stories, and that's it. So I really appreciate people sharing those things with me. I think it's important.
Yeah. So, what would you say are some things that have helped as you've tried to balance? And I'm trying to put myself in your shoes for a moment. You have an 11-year-old and 18-month-old,
She was 18 and then a 5-month old,
and then a
18 5
five
months.
month
Yeah.
old baby. And you're trying to balance surviving and helping your oldest daughter, process and maybe grieve some of this and taking care of those babies and taking care of you. How did you manage to not lose your mind during that time and to be able to heal?
So I think for the first few weeks, especially, I really relied on my mom. I have a huge family, but my mom she's really been my champion. I couldn't be in our house for a few weeks after he passed away. So we went and stayed with her, and she was so hands-on with my kids. Um, but to be honest, I don't remember feeling like I'm getting through it. Like the first year was such a blur to me. Like I don't know if you felt that, but I look back and I'm like, I don't remember. But I
Yeah, I
guess
think
I did
that,
well because we're all here.
well, you're here and you're able to smile a little bit, which is good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that first year, our brains really try to protect us from
Mhm.
feeling a lot. So it puts us in this, adrenaline, almost fight or flight, just like survival mode. But then our brains are like really foggy and hazy. And there's so many weird things I did. Like, I put my car
Yes.
titles in the silverware drawer. I'm like, I don't know what was
Yes.
happening.
Yes, one time, I
But
think it was, maybe a month after he passed, I was in the school pickup line to get my oldest, and I just drove away without her. Like, school didn't even get out, I was just sitting in the line, and I just took off, and I'm like, "Oh my god. What did I just do?" Like, things so out of character, but I think you're right, I think our brain is just so overwhelmed, and it's just trying to protect us, but that's one thing I do remember I did. That was terrible.
well, it, it happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think the first, especially those first few months, it's about surviving. and
Yeah.
just what does it take to get through the day. Um,
Yeah.
but is there any advice that you would have for people who have kids and they're trying to help them and also help themselves? Or even, now being a couple of years almost out, is there anything that you have found that's been helpful in having those discussions with your family?
Yeah, I think for my oldest, she's 13 now. I have her now in therapy weekly, which has been huge. She did try therapy shortly after he passed away, but she just wasn't feeling it. I don't believe therapy should ever be forced. She's had some issues to where I feel like, now it's pretty necessary. So she does that. I to help myself, I did therapy. I did a lot of EMDR work. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's been monumental in my healing. It helps me so much.
Talk a little bit about EMDR because I think a lot of people probably are not going to be familiar with that.
Yeah, so it stands for, I believe, eye motion desensitization, like reprocessing. And so what it does is it brings traumatic images or experiences, memories, to the frontal lobe of the brain where they could be reprocessed. And they do that by it's like eye movement. It's a really cool thing. Like I don't know how it works, but it does. And so my therapist, like for example, the body bag image. That was something that really bothered me for a very long time. So we focused on that, and she would have me think about it while watching dots like go across because we do everything on Zoom. And it just, I still think about it, but I'm noticing ever since I've done a few sessions of EMDR, I'm not brought to tears or I'm not sitting there feeling a lot of sorrow when I think of that. So it's really helped just reprocessing that. I don't know how it works, but it does. I'm a big fan. I think if anyone's struggling to definitely give that a shot.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. And I haven't tried that, but I have some images that haunt me as well.
So
And
sorry.
thank you. I know the more time I would spend thinking about it, talking about it, like just continuing to bring it up, continuing to bring it up, I think over time you become a little desensitized to
Yeah,
just the raw edge of that pain. So I can think about
absolutely.
it now and, occasionally I might still get teary-eyed talking about it, but it's not nearly like it was where it would just be like a wave of grief and overwhelm
Mhm.
just thinking about that one thing or wishing I could go back and rearrange, what happened in that scenario.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I totally get going back and rearranging. Like I don't have a lot of regrets and I don't know if anything would turn out differently, but there's a lot of things I wish I would have done differently. And I really have to catch myself when I feel myself going into the would haves and could haves and should haves because I've spent a lot of time doing that and it has been nothing but misery for me. So I really need to be, vigilant of that and just stop and say, well, we're here now. Can't go back and change it as much as I want to, but
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing that really helped me with that is there's a book called The Grief Recovery Method. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so it's let's see if I have, okay, for those of you that are not on video, I'm just holding up a copy of this book, The Grief Recovery Method Handbook.
Okay.
And there's also like an 8-week program that you can go through. And it's really big about the continued where we feel guilty or we feel that sense of regret. It's really because we wish things were better, more, or different in the relationship that we
Yeah.
had and in those final moments. And for me, I just like, I would keep replaying those images. I would keep
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I wish, when the EMTs came and picked him up, I would have done this and I didn't. Or I wish, I would have said this or not said this or whatever it is. I felt like there were so many unresolved, unsaid
Yeah.
things. And
Yep.
this, it's the only evidence based program in the entire world that has been
Oh, wow.
proven. Yeah, it's been scientifically proven to
Cool.
help people move through their grief. And so for me, when I went through that program, I mean, even though it was 2 years later, I just felt so much lighter and like there were no things left unsaid. There were no more unresolved loops. So I'm a huge advocate. Even if
Oh
you
my
read the
gosh, I'm
book,
totally
yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna put
Um,
that in my notes.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll include it in the show notes, for people watching as well, but I'm a
Oh,
huge
that's great.
advocate for doing that to get past all of those like, "Oh, I really wish, I could have changed that," because that was big for
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah, and I think I try to keep in mind too, hindsight is 2020. We only learn after the incident occurred, so we can't like condemn ourselves for not knowing prior to. And so I really try to, stick with that, but it's hard. And so I definitely want to check that out because that is something that is still very relevant to me today. I still go into the woulda, coulda, shouldas, and it sucks.
I think you'll love it. I think you'll absolutely
Awesome.
love it if you go through that.
Great.
So, yes.
Great.
So, as we get to the end of our time, what final, words of wisdom or advice or encouragement would you leave with someone who's walking in your shoes or, who has a similar experience and story to you?
So definitely, I think a big thing for me is just to rely on people when they say they want to help. Most of the time, they mean it. Um, if somebody says, "Hey, I would like to send dinner," like accept it. Just take the help. As far as anybody who might have lost somebody in the same way that Nate had passed, I have found a lot in of healing through volunteering, through with organizations that work on overdose prevention, that educate the public about it. Um, so for me, that's been monumental because unfortunately, I can't save Nate. It's too late for that. But hopefully, I can save the next person and the next family from going through this. I think volunteering, just in general, regardless, is a great way to get out of yourself, do something for someone else, and it's been huge in my healing.
Yeah.
NEMDR, I do recommend that highly.
That's awesome. I'll have to check into that more to see,
Yeah, it's
exactly
great.
how that works because it sounds really great, for what you've
Yeah,
been doing. And I know
it's
several people
awesome.
have mentioned doing that. And I love that you're turning your pain into purpose and that you're looking
Thank
for
you.
ways to give back because I think that is very healing
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, it's huge, and I've met hopefully lifelong friends along the way doing that, so I love it. Every week for almost I think it's been a year and a half I've been doing that, so it's good.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Lauren, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and just
Thank
being
you.
vulnerable and open. I appreciate it, and I know our audience will as well.
Thank you, Emily, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the Brave Widow podcast. I would love to help you take your next step, whether that's healing your heart, finding hope, or achieving your dreams for the future. Do you need a safe space to connect with other like-minded widows? Do you wish you had how-tos for getting through the next steps in your journey, organizing your life, or moving through grief? What about live calls where you get answers to your burning questions? The Brave Widow membership community is just what you need. Inside, you'll find courses to help guide you, a community of other widows to connect with, live coaching and Q&A calls, and small group coaching where you can work on what matters most to you. Learn how to heal your heart, find hope, reclaim joy, and dream again for the future. It is possible. Head on over to bravewidow.com to learn more.